Welcome to the Pastor's Podcast. This is Pastor Scott, and with me today is Pastor Matt.
Hey.
Pastor Ara.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon.
It's afternoon right now.
Afternoon.
But you're saying
You don't
good
know when
morning.
people are going to listen to it.
Oh, yeah, that's very
Good
smart of
evening
you.
too.
Good day.
Good day.
Good midnight. Is there a... What do you say in the middle of the night?
Bon nuit.
Good evening? I don't know. And Steph Moss is with us as well.
Hi, guys.
Medianoche in Spanish.
And today we are going to be talking about one of our core values that we as a church, one of the things that we value the most is that we are both globally and locally invested.
Glocal.
Glocally invested.
Steph, what do you think
Or
about the word glocal?
I like lobally better.
Globally. That sounds like an earlobe, like you're focused on an
Or a
earlobe.
brain lobe.
Or a brain lobe.
Glocal.
Glocally.
Yeah.
Globally and locally invested. It's important to it, and actually we think that God has created the church, every local church, to both be invested in their locale and in and across the world, right? In with local churches and ministries that are ministering to and bringing the gospel to the ends of the earth. But before we talk a little bit more about that, just a reminder about what our core values are. We've done this a few times now, and so we're gonna leave Steph out of this test so that
You don't know the core values, Steph?
Do you know
she's
the core
actually the
values?
director of staff and operations.
Yeah.
It
I
sounds
mean-
like you're trying to like bait me, like as if you don't know them and you're hoping I'll say them.
Oh, I
just so that
obviously
I can-
know them.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
one of the
let's hear it.
pastors.
What are they? What are they? I'd
Well,
love to know.
glocally invested.
I feel bad now. I'm going to put R on the spot and see if you can name one.
No, I have them all in front of me right now.
All right, what are they?
Okay. Gospel-centered, grace and growth, people-oriented, people over programs, theologically engaged, being fluent in the Bible and culture, collaboratively structured, leading and ministering together, intentionally unified, pursuing a multi-blank church, and locally and globally invested. Love for the marginalized, love for the lost.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Globally, locally invested, which manifests in love for the marginalized and love for the lost. What do we mean by that, Matt?
I think what we mean by that is that God has called us as a church to represent him in this world in different spheres and in different ways. And so we are called here in West Los Angeles to invest ourselves and love the people of West Los Angeles, and we are also called to do that globally. Obviously, there are limitations globally, but we're called to be engaged globally, and we have this breakdown kind of geographically, but there's also a call for the church to love and reach out to and share the gospel with the lost, people who don't know Christ. And there's a call on the church. We as Christians are called by Christ to love and care for the marginalized, really to reflect God's heart for the marginalized to the world around us, because there's people who are hurting in different ways, suffering in different ways, marginalized in different ways in our society and around the world, and we're called to love and serve and care for them as well. And so basically all those two spheres and those two groups of people, if you will, I mean, there's no like simple, they're not separate or distinct groups automatically, but two different geographic spheres and two different spheres of people that we're called to reach out to. And so it really builds it into four different quadrants where you have God's heart for the marginalized locally, God's heart for the marginalized globally, God's heart for the lost locally, and God's heart for the lost globally. And we're called to have a heart for those four quadrants as a church.
So it's basically four core values in one.
It's kind of four core values in one. In
I
fact,
really
when we were putting together the core values, and it took a long time.
probably longer than it should have.
I would just want to say, for everyone who's like, oh, you got 6 core values, it's too many. My strong argument was we only need 4. Up, down, in, out, or something like that. I had arrows.
Like
it was terrible.
Yeah.
So anyways, these are a lot better. But we did combine. We were talking about.
We combined a bunch.
We were combining because we were like, the manifestation of this core value is one heart manifested in these 4 different areas.
Yeah. And it's that the local church ought to be looking outwards, and not just looking outwards, living outwards, right? Ought to be engaged in this. Why we talk about being globally and locally invested.
Invested,
right?
outwards.
We're invested in our entire lives, in our hearts, in our interest, in our energy, in our resources, right? Like the church doesn't only exist for itself and for the kind of serving of those within the church, right? It exists with this mandate, right, to go and make disciples of all nations, and we see that paired throughout Scripture, and particularly throughout the New Testament, throughout Jesus's ministry, with a particular eye and heart to the marginalized in the world, and bringing the good news of the gospel, the good news to bear, and in people who desperately need hope, and manifesting that not just in words, right, but in deeds, and right, not just loving people in words, but in deeds and in truth.
And I like the word invested because it shows that we're not just interested, and we're not just like casually connected. We put our time, energy, resources, financial, our gifting is utilized, expended, if you will, invested in these people because God has called us to do so.
Yeah.
And also don't forget that we are very blessed to be in Los Angeles. So global is here. So when you turn around, you can see we're talking was like Mexican food. It was right before podcast.
We talk about carnitas.
Carnitas and pastor and asada.
Y cabeza, y lengua.
And the kebab and other Thai food and everything. Like global is here, so we kind of test here and blessed to be part of this. Like 270 languages speak only in Los Angeles County. So everywhere, like every place we go, we see the pop-up the restaurants with different cultures, and we are so blessed to see every day. And if we, as a church, we don't do that, like we will not be part of global ministry and local ministry, was like, this is gospel, and this is what we are living right now to reach the world through Los Angeles.
I think that's such a cool picture, because you think about Jesus's command in Matthew 28, go make disciples of all nations, and there's something really compelling about the fact that the nations, a lot of them have come here, and so this global local investment actually is reflected in our local investment, and the sort of interconnection between the two, and that still also connects us globally as well in different ways, and so it's really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that's why we realized that we couldn't really separate them, right? Like there's not certain things that we do where like, oh, that's just global, like right. Oh, that's just local, but the two overlap in so many significant ways.
Like, is Cornerstone Farsi local or global?
Yeah,
like Ara, exactly. Who watches? Where do people watch the services on Sunday?
Everywhere.
Like, give me examples.
Like all Turkey. I was seeing like New Zealand, Australia.
Amazing.
Iran.
I was going to say
Germany.
Australia as a joke. I was just about to say.
No, but wherever Farsi speaking people,
Hawaii.
Right?
Actually, somebody became Christian in Hawaii.
Iran.
Right. I didn't know there is Iranian in Hawaii. What are you doing there?
How did you get there? There's planes now. It's like a 5-hour flight from here.
Yeah. but also, I mean, but it's amazingly, like, and that's true for Cornerstone Espanol as well, where there's people watching in Guatemala and Latin America, all over the place, El Salvador. Like, people are tuning in all over the world. There's a sense in which our local investment is global too, in such a powerful way.
And not just in our services, right? Like, as we disciple and grow up people, and they move to different parts of the country, back to different parts of the world, like the discipleship and the investment that is here, we want to instill in people a heart for where they are and equip them for that, whether they are here in Los Angeles for 40 years or whether they're here in Los Angeles for 2.
Yeah, for example, last Sunday, I met this young girl. She knew that I was ministering in Turkey, and she started speaking Turkish to me, and I said, "Oh, I start a little bit conversation, and how you get, how do you know that?" And I said, "I start learning. I want to go to Turkey," and do you know somebody that speak Turkish? And say, yeah, you can practice a little bit with me, and also with some of people that I know. And that's start her ministry and her vision here in Los Angeles to learn Turkish. And actually, she's going to meet some of real like Turkish speakers here. So that's investing here and being in the church in Cornerstone, West LA, and Los Angeles is bringing many open doors for us to reach the world.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, and I'm actually so glad this has gone in this direction. Yeah, Steph.
Well, I was just going to add, as the only like non-pastor at the table, there is.
Steph is here. Sorry.
You also don't need to like raise your hand. You just talk.
Well, in radio, there's a lot of like cues behind the
no,
scenes.
no,
like, I'm
not
next.
here. You got to fight for your spot here.
That might less be a function of the medium and more a function of our personality.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah,
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, so there's a joke right in our church that you guys are terrible at naming things like locally.
Yeah,
right.
That'd be a perfect example.
Yeah, great example. But I think
Shout out to my kids.
As a non-pastor who is not a part of the making of the core values, I think I really appreciate the attention to detail of the wording. And I think easily churches can say we have interests in these either people groups, or we have interests in these kind of global issues, and those can change every year. You can go through a season where orphans are kind of the hot button, hot button kind of like issue that churches will go after, or whether it's trafficking issues or homelessness, and that can kind of change as around the world as there are varying things that kind of countries and communities are facing. But I felt like seeing the word invested was really intentional, and it speaks something that we're going to invest in something that has, it's a sacrifice to make an investment, and hopefully that there's some sort of kingdom return on the investment. But then that the investment is also, I believe there's another word in there, wasn't engaged, like that there's not this passive. Some people do have investments and they put them in in an account, and you just kind of live off the returns, and you can kind of have this passive kind of income in a sense. But I feel like we have an investment, and then we really have this part of the value that's written out of being engaged with the partners locally and globally. And so just as like a non-pastor, I really appreciate your intention with the wording, and then in how we as a church body are going to live that out.
That's so helpful. And I think that I even appreciate you noticing that in that, like, that term invested is really, I think, at the core of what we mean by this. Like, we're not just, I think there's ways that you can be globally interested, right? Like or globally informed. But we desire to be more than globally interested or globally informed. Like those are maybe the first steps to being wisely invested, but we want to be invested in that holistic way. And one of the things actually I appreciate about where this conversation has gone is it demonstrates the fact that I think sometimes it could be a temptation to say, oh yeah, we're globally invested, and the one way that manifests itself is that we support missionaries. Right. But I think what you've seen is that this isn't just a program that we think should be a part of it. It's a core value that we believe ought to infuse everything we do. Like being globally and locally invested ought to infuse and shape and color what we do on a Sunday morning, what our live stream. This is why we took extra, time and effort to fight to have live streams in 3 services, because we are we are at the very nature of it, a multilingual church. And at the same time, that core value then spreads out into our community groups, into our relationships, into other programs we do, into the life of the church. Like we want this to be, and hope that for a lot of people who are living and experiencing the ethos of the church are being able to look at it and say, oh yeah, that does describe what I've seen, what I've felt. And in addition to that core value in the culture of the church, one of the ways that manifests itself is through these partnerships that help facilitate, and this is what being invested looks like, right? So we're not just interested, we don't just designate a portion of the budget or of our interest to the globe,
one Sunday a month or something,
or
and like a year,
and then go like send it out to whatever.
That's Pastor Jim. He's just peeling out in the parking lot.
doing donuts.
Yeah,
in the
doing
parking lot.
donuts in the parking lot.
Pastor Jim again.
It's wild. You guys can't see this. He's eating a donut while doing donuts.
It's
meta.
It's his Wednesday ritual.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday.
But we have these partnerships because the goal isn't just to like, oh, we want to feel good because we sent something somewhere or we visited somewhere. Like, we want to be deeply invested wherever we are invested, and we can't be invested everywhere, but we want to be invested deeply, both financially, with our resources, with our hearts, with our prayers, with our intentions, with our energy. And so, Steph, I'd love for you to even just give us maybe a couple of examples. So, Steph, and I think we've talked about this before, but in addition to being our director of staff and operations, she's also served us by facilitating a lot of our global partnerships over the last 4 years now, 4 years, and is really a helpful, somebody who helps facilitate these relationships for our church family. And so, I'd love to just even hear a couple of examples, Steph. I mean, we don't have to go through like the whole role of them, but examples of places that we're invested where we're not just, knowledgeable but we're seeking to be increasingly invested in other parts of the world.
Well, I guess I want to share first that when I first came on to the global team or the partnerships team, I was really, I guess, impressed that there was so much heart that went into it. I have been a part of conversations of other maybe kind of faith-based groups that were interested in local and global initiatives and things of such things. But I felt like I really learned the hearts of our pastors, and that they wanted exactly what you're explaining here, that they really wanted to have a relationship and not just kind of a flashy thing that we can say our church is a part of, kind of this something that makes us look good. It was never about like our church looking good and like we're in the know and we are, a part of something that's really like maybe popular in kind of like social justice efforts and things like that. It just really seemed like they're intentional relationships locally and across the globe. And so first it took me a year just to even learn all of those and really see the heart. And I was just continually was impressed at the consistency of it. It wasn't just for show. Over and over I saw just how much you guys valued relationship. And so over the years, I think what I've learned is staying with a partner over the long term has really allowed us to see how God moves in seasons and through pandemics, and how sometimes, the whole parable about, being, in the fields and like seeds and the waterer and the, the grower and the planter and the sower and all those things, really some of our partners out in the world and even locally here, it takes just so long for them to get their feet wet and then be on the ground with families or individuals and come alongside them in life before you ever kind of see some sort of fruit that maybe you're hoping for. And maybe sometimes never seeing the fruit, but it's maybe sometimes when you've moved out or moved beyond, that when you left, as we heard from the Gustafsons, when you left or away for some period of time, you now see the fruit, that there are people now kind of able to take the word and spread it among their own, communities. So I feel like I got off your question.
No, it's okay.
What was your question?
I mean, any examples like that? Yeah.
Yeah. So one, I feel like there's a lot of like ones that they're not these tangible. We are helping this group with this particular marginalized people that, to, let's say, I'm trying to like pick a topic out there. A lot of times people want to hear like a direct story, like maybe homelessness and how we're saving people or getting housing or something. But a lot of our partners are doing this work that has so many, it's like a multi-pronged approach. Yeah. And so, for example, we have some people overseas that, whether they're doing medical clinics or food, resource outreach and passing out food in the neighborhoods, they're using churches and they're using pastors to do that work. So that's kind of the conduit of provision, right? So they're saying like God tangibly provides for you, and as the pastor, we've been equipping local pastors and local churches to go and meet in communities and bring seeds and teach farming and build latrines and things like of that sort. And through those tangible provisions, then the relationships, right, the doors are open to actually meet and have conversations. And so that's kind of one example where there's all these different ways that they're going into communities and equipping pastors and churches to be active in their faith, and then how that then bears fruit for spiritual conversations and people coming to church, and because there's been a trust and a relationship built. And then you have, kind of the bigger entities, like when we support ARU, who is a huge Christian church. You think sometimes, oh, well, they're already Christians, so why are we investing there?
That's Africa Renewal University.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Africa Renewal University.
Just in case anyone didn't.
Thanks. Yeah, in Uganda, I think sometimes people will wonder, well, why would you even invest there? They're already Christians. And there's a lot of false teachings that are really prevalent among certain communities all over the world. Even here in the U.S., we have, a lot of false teachings. And so one, really investing in quality theology, investing in students who, I remember one of my first trips there, the vice chancellor had sat down with us and shared, I know a lot of people in the U.S. are really passionate about orphanages in America. And he said, and that's great. And I know God has a heart for that. And he said, what better way? He said, we have men and women here who, when you invest in their education, they then can go on and have quality jobs. They're going to be people that are running, children's centers and group homes and things like that in this country. And when you invest in a quality education, one that is based biblically, in biblical truth, we are going to begin to transform the landscape of what it looks like to care for the marginalized and orphans in our nation. And he just said, it's just kind of an indirect way, like not a lot of people think of kind of approaching the issue of orphans globally, like through maybe education and higher education, let alone that. So
it's more of like a long-term, multifaceted, holistic approach to making an impact rather than some sort of one big splash.
Right. Yeah. It's like kind of helping the mom who has, who might one day have children, and you want to make sure that child can stay with that mom and can be cared for and can be fed and can be in the community and have an education. It's just this kind of larger holistic approach, and rather than saying I'm just going to kind of help that one baby that's already been orphaned, a little bit more of a prevention approach.
No, I mean, I think that's super helpful because I think that actually puts a little bit of meat on what we mean by invested, right? What we mean, because we do across the board long to engage in these longer term, more holistic, multifaceted, and also then localized and contextualized partnerships, right? Where we're not saying, hey, you know what? The things that excite Americans in West LA the most are the things that you need the most. Usually that's not the case. Yeah. And so instead of simply, and we can get excited, and I think it just takes a little bit of explanation to get really excited about the really incredible work going on, but we want to engineer that from the ground up, not from here down. And I think that's an opportunity we have, like you mentioned, Ara, as people who not only live here and have a unique opportunity with all this globalization, but we also have a ton of resources that God has called us to steward for the sake of the church.
And also don't forget, like I'm seeing the church ministry and Cornerstone, like maybe 6-7 years that I'm in Cornerstone. Yeah. Sometimes because you used to see all the time like this and heart for the mission locally and globally, sometimes you might as the leaders and also maybe members, you will forget about this fact that Steph was talking about. Like, we want to help, like it's cool, it's popular, the churches, like I saw in my life ministry that people, they have lots of resources and they don't know what they should do with the money, and say, oh, okay, there is a need, we'll send the money, but what I see here is so different than many popular things that in this Christian world is doing. Is like, for example, the churches is saying like we are cross culture. For example, the huge church is saying, oh, there is 300 language group is in our church, and they're so proud of that. But when you see in the leadership, when you're seeing in elders, there is no representative of that group in the leaders. And one of the things that I amaze, and that's why, like, in our church, we have representative in each group in our eldership, and also in our people life. If you see, like, your global ministry, if you're working in Africa, we have people from Africa in our church. We have people from Indonesia in our church. We have people in all over the world that we are supporting them. We are putting our heart and mind. It's not just because we have resources, because we have people here and locally investing in them. Now we have heart for their countries. For example, we support Iran, we support different countries. So sometimes we
support Iran. Do you want to clarify what you mean by that?
No, I mean ministry.
Yeah, ministry happening in Iran.
Farsi speakers.
Wait, Matt, were you worried that was actually going to be misconstrued?
I don't know. It's a little bit of a complicated relationship that the United States has with the country of Iran. I just want to make sure that you're also a well-known figure in this world. So
that's right.
We're
just helping you out.
Yeah.
You're gonna get emails.
Yeah. So that's why, like, I think the coolest things that I see as a mission in the church, like, we have representative of each group in our church and eldership, and in our leadership also, which is like we have, like, a pastor from Oklahoma, Pastor Jim.
Is that representation?
We have pastor from Guatemala,
from
Pastor Jose, and pastor from Iran. So it's just
it's not perfect. We obviously have a lot more work to do in this area, but I think what you're saying, Pastor Ara, is that there's this manifestation of our investment locally and globally that exists and can be seen in the local church.
Exactly.
In the way that we prioritize certain things.
So which is, so many churches, they missed just they saying, like, because cool, we have like 300 language group, but there is no investment in their groups. Maybe little here and there in my life ministry experience, but not really putting the heart, like, for example, we are working hard for live streaming, how we can do it. Like, the priority, what I see it, is not English speakers. Priority is 3 languages, Spanish, English, which is, I really appreciate it. Even in the numbers, like, I'm saying, like, English is in priority because there's bigger church, but you guys, how you deal with this is exactly the heart of the church and core value, which is, I really, really appreciate it.
Can I piggyback off of him?
Of course.
So earlier my examples were pretty focused on just some of our global partner examples, but I love what you shared because it's absolutely true. Like, as we've made considerations of how do we grow with some of our partnerships, we easily could kind of grasp onto anybody that comes through the doors of, whatever kind of local nonprofit or current hot button topic or issue is kind of plaguing our city, which there's a million of them. But what's really driven some of our partnerships are the people. So when we have somebody locally in our church that either has a heart or has a relationship or has, maybe it's the kind of their culture or language group or whatever that they're a part of, if, as they begin to develop and we see God growing them or leading them or kind of using them in an area of ministry, and how we've been able to come behind them and alongside of them and just support what we see God already doing in that person locally. So you think of somebody like a Danny Nidich and, his heart for people that are in gangs or impacted by gang community. And just as we saw God already working through him, wow, it made sense that us locally as a church body could come alongside that work. Or you see a Leslie, kind of just her heart over the years, she was continually invested in children that are in the out-of-home care, foster care system, and just how God continued to grow that because we were able to come alongside her and the church was able to move. And so you're right, it just kind of naturally grows out of the investment of engaging with people locally and where God is placing them, and then how that then expands, outside of the church walls. So,
yeah, Steph, I would love to hear more from you about. Let's just take like one partnership. I think about like Africa, and then maybe this is, I'm taking over your hosting duties, Scotty. Sorry about that.
Feel free.
Yeah. But
just gonna sit back.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do this for a while. Actually, I've been podcasting for a while.
If you've all been listening, you understand why.
Yeah. I mean, you haven't done a terrible job, but just because it's such an interesting place where we have had people here who have specialized skill sets that are used to bless the school there. There's a lot of relationships with people over there. We've had pastors or leaders of the school over there even come over here and talk to I've been there. Pastor Scott has been there a few times. A lot of different people from the church have been there. We were going to go again this summer and didn't get a chance to. But there's a lot of ways that we're supporting them more than just financially. And I think maybe sometimes people in the church don't get a sense of the kind of relationship that we actually have with a partner like Africa Renewal University, which is such a wonderful partnership, and the reach that they have too, right? Because it's not just impacting Uganda. Like, they're sending people to plant churches in South Sudan, places we can't go. Or, me as an American, they're sending people all over East Africa in different ways, planting churches, investing in communities and things like that. And the impact of Africa Renewal University is hugely felt across that region. But to give people a sense of what are some of the ways that we have partnered with them and been blessed by them also in our relationship with Africa Renewal.
Two things stand out to me. So one is, yes, of course, we always do kind of a year-end giving. We give monthly to all of our, key partners and legacy partners, but we also, have the year-end kind of special funds projects that a lot of people have given to. And yeah, sure, that money goes over and it definitely helps to kind of strengthen some projects that they're doing. But we have taken, like you said, a few teams over. And something that really stands out to me is a lot of times people pay a lot. I mean, the flight alone is just a lot of money. And then it's pretty affordable to stay there on campus and to kind of eat on campus. It's not very costly once you get in country, but that investment of money for your passport and all the shots and the flight alone is a financial investment. And many times people on the team have kind of wrestled with, isn't it just better for me to send them my $3,000 than to me go for 2 weeks? What am I really going to do for 2 weeks? Can't that $3,000 go a lot further? And so people really wrestling with what is the better investment. And by the end of the trip, I believe, email me if you're listening to this and I have it wrong, but I feel like what I've heard most people say is when they left, they knew that, one, they met other fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, and just that encouragement alone, that you have these brothers and sisters all the way across on the other side of the world, and to see how Christ works in them, through them, that mutual kind of relationship, spiritual brotherhood and sisterhood, is just a beautiful thing. And it kind of shrinks your world a little bit, just to kind of feel like you actually know somebody else across the world. But also, one year, one of the people on the team went and helped create their website. You could easily do that, work from home right now. We're all doing that, right? Could have easily done that from the comfort of his own home, but he went there and to see the struggle that they had with internet, and that's why they couldn't build their website this year, to see how stretched the staff were, that they do multiple jobs and that they are so people focused, that culturally the people over programs, and how even just the investment in people kind of was is why it took so long to finish a project like a website, which to them was not as important as the person sitting in front of you, right? And so for them to see some of those values of this culture, to see that, yeah, I could have made this website from home, but I wouldn't have built that relationship. I wouldn't have understood the struggle of just basic things that I have here, Wi-Fi everywhere I go, and understanding why after that trip, it was so important that we gave to their internet, their internet program and things like that. But yeah, I feel like most people they think just sending the money would maybe be better than them going, but in the end, they always realize that the relationship is what was so important and so imperative to understanding what the actual work looks like on the ground, so that they can be more relevant, I think, in their prayers. And then the other thing that their prayers and their support as they kind of then share with others, right? How can you invest, or how can you come alongside this great university over in Uganda? It's I wouldn't be able to speak accurately about that without having just lived life with them for 2 weeks.
And not only the 2 weeks, but the relationship,
yes.
Right? But so, that ongoing relationship that you can continually speak from.
Yeah, so that's actually, my next point was just...
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I was so excited about it.
Great. Yeah, that was a great leading into my second thing that stands out the most is just the relationship. I mean, even in the pandemic, just that people have reached out asking how we're doing, that we've reached out to them to ask how they're doing. And it's just not because I want to know if you need money, or it's because I'm just wondering how your families and your communities and your jobs are holding up, and that they've prayed, for my family and my, my dad's death and things like that. It's just, it truly shrinks the world. It's a brother and a sister that I've gained across the world that I will see one day in heaven. And it does. It encourages you to know, like, that one, it humbles you that you are not Jesus. Like, you are not the Savior who's going to save the whole world. There are many other capable people all over the world that God has equipped to do this work. And so we are not coming in as experts necessarily. We have expertise, but I feel like we're coming alongside these partners and just bolstering kind of the work they're already doing. And we can kind of give them a little bit of relief while we're there, maybe helping them. But yeah, it's so worth it. The emails back and forth, they're very isolated sometimes in the other, across the world. Even some of the local partnerships, they feel sometimes alone in the work that they're doing. And I think, what stands out the most is you just seeing, I think, the kingdom of God that he talks about in the Bible. I feel like I've seen that now tangibly on earth in like these little ways, and you get a taste of it, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and man, I feel like we could. I'd love to try to explain. Maybe we'll do this. Well, we are doing this through partner highlights and updates. We are giving you snapshots of these specific.
You
partners.
do one with ARU with Dennis.
ARU with Dennis.
Lisa and
Craig and the Humbles. In Indonesia, and we're going to continue to do those. It does make me so excited because when it's a relationship, it's also reciprocal. And I think you were hitting on this, right?
Yes.
We're not just the ones helping them. Like, they're helping us. They're teaching us. We're growing together because of the relationship. And when things step out of transactional and become relational, then they're reciprocal and they facilitate and actually strengthen our ministry and our life as a church as well. And that's true with a lot of our local partners as well, and the impact they've had on the culture of our church, whether it's Prodigal or Claris or even some of the those working with college students. All those things just continue to grow and strengthen. So we keep talking about this. We're about out of time, but the last thing I wanted to do, last thing and then a bonus. But the last thing I wanted to do was this, since we're talking about it this time of year, I'd love for you just to. We're about to announce our annual Christmas global partner. What do we call it? Our Christmas offering for these partners. How does that? I don't want to make a plug for it. Like, we're going to talk about, but how does that fit into this as a holistic value or into these relationships? I'd love just a quick explanation of that as people are going to be hearing about it.
Christmas partnership offering.
Yes.
So okay.
I rebranded that like 2 years ago, maybe, to that CPO.
You did. You see, you're good at naming
It
things.
used to be Christmas missionary offering.
It did.
Yes, but there's
Partnership.
because there are some countries where they are closed to. We need to be careful with our word choice, and
Partnership is great.
Yeah, so we are investing in some business partners across the world, and so how it fits in, I think one is, any investment takes a sacrifice, right? And so at this time of year, we want to buy our own kids gifts or our family members gifts or ourselves some gifts, and so to sacrificially figure out where in your budget you can give to a special project that might help to either expand some of the needs or the efforts that are in play right now with our local and global partners. I think it fits in that way. I think our Christmas partnership offering, it does kind of offer a way for the church automatically to hear kind of what's going on. So it is a way that if people are a little not as maybe engaged, they can kind of hear about it around this time of year. It might pique their interest, which might cause them to then want to be informed, and then might lead to them being more invested and engaged, whether it's a future trip or.
I don't know if we made up that
we
thing,
did
but it's
right
great.
now. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's keep using it.
We'll figure out an acronym for that one, guys, and get back to you. So I think it's just another. We want to make sure we have intentional opportunities for people to hear and then to act, right? And so the Christmas partnership offering is the first place to do it if you haven't yet. I say this all the time to people. I wish they could see my emails after we gift and give this season. It is just,
Yeah.
it's a gift from me. It's like kind of my year-end bonus. I get to see them receive, this from the abundance that our church has received, and then how that blesses their teams or, the work that they're doing is just so fun to, I get to see the tangible like results. Not everybody gets to see that, but, yeah. So I guess I invite you this year. This isn't supposed to be our plug, but let's do it.
All right. Awesome. Well, I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that when you hear us describe this core value, it's not like, oh, I never thought of that, or never, that doesn't make sense with the church. I know, right? We hope that these core values are a vocabulary that when you hear about them, when you even hear them described, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense of what I've been seeing. That makes sense of what I've experienced. That makes sense of the ethos that I've come to experience here as a part of this church family. And at the same time, we don't do it perfectly. There's all sorts of ways we can grow in this. We can be increasingly more globally and locally invested, and are striving to do that individually as God just continues to draw our hearts in, and as a church family together. And so with that, I hope that blesses you, and I hope that encourages you. And if you're new to Cornerstone, I hope it just sheds a little bit of light on what we believe is most important to the local church. I mentioned a bonus, though. But I'm going to make us wait for the bonus content. We're going to release it in a couple of days. It's just a little bit of teaser. I want to hear Pastor Ara talk a little bit about what's going on in Armenia, and how we can be praying as those that are globally informed and globally invested. So look for that in a couple of days, and we'll see you on Sunday.